So in today's tutorial, we're going to be making these grain renders in Cinema 4D and xparticles with a little bit of Octane at the end. Don't think the render engine really matters at all for this tutorial what you're using. I feel like I'm using Megascans in just about every tutorial in a minute, but nonetheless we'll be using them again in this one. If you've seen my previous xparticles tutorials I've been posting the last few weeks, this is going to be kind of crossing the same parameters and kind of gizmos and areas that we went through in all of those tutorials. So I would say this is going to be the most simple one yet. And you know, there's a whole bunch of renders I've kicked out here. I'll go over how I mix the colors here and got some nice kind of interactions there and got them to pop. Some yellow and white ones, some nice purple ones somewhere. Yeah. So, you know, super simple stuff. We're really just spawning particles on Megascans and giving them some fluid parameters. So I'll run you through that. It shouldn't take too long, and let's get on with it. So first things first, start of this tutorial, we're going to be in Megascans. The kind of scans we want to be looking at here is these kind of beds of rocks. And one thing I have found is just about any of them really work quite well. We're just going to be using this as our collider and our emitter. So, you know, if you go down Megascans and you find one that you think would look cool, I mean, you don't have to restrict yourself to rocks. You can use just about anything. But for this tutorial, we're going to be using these kind of rocks. I'm going to use rocks that I've used in the past for the sake of the tutorial and for the sake of you accumulating the desired result you most likely clicked for. So I'm going to go down and find that. I have found that when it comes to art direction though, you know what, doing it over those kind of snow ones would look really cool. But I have found that when it comes down to art direction, the darker rocks look a lot better on the particles. Don't know if it's just me, I have a bit of trouble making sandy stuff look nice, anything that's kind of light or sandy looking, but I found that the darker ones do look a lot nicer. So I may have used this one. I think this one's nice, it's got a lot of grooves. I might even use that one if I cannot find the other one. I think that was it, yeah. So, no, it wasn't. This was it. This was the one I used initially on those renders. But this one does look awesome. But I'll use this one. So we're going to change this to Octane here in Cinema 4D. And then we'll just drop that Icelandic rock assembly in. Okay. So scaling wise, I think you could bring it up a little bit. But I don't think you want to go too crazy. Maybe just a little bit bigger than a cube. And I think that should be good. So what we're actually going to do here, this is a bit of a dodgy setup, I'm not going to lie, it's not the cleanest thing. That's probably because I haven't spent tons of time kind of perfecting it and optimizing it, and I'll go into that and how you could do that. But I don't want to restrict myself from making the tutorial because I haven't spent weeks finding the perfect way to set this up, you know. So in this XP emitter here, we're going to go to object and we're going to change the emitter shape to object. And then we're going to drop in our object. And then if we hit play, you're going to see all the particles spawning off of it and flying up in the air. I'm going to change our scene here to 300 frames, so that's 10 seconds. If you change this to points and have a look, same thing happens again. Change it to polygon area, same thing happens again. We're going to leave it on polygon area. Anyway, basically all of them are going to do the same thing right now. So, first thing we want to do is add in a gravity. I'm going to go to motion modifiers and XP gravity. We hit play, they're all falling down. Now they're kind of springing up and then falling through the surface. So on our, I'm going to call these rocks because it's a really ugly name. We're going to right click, Insidium tags and XP collider. And we're just going to keep the normals on what they are. We don't have to edit this tag at all. And when we hit play, it's all going to kind of sit there now. You can kind of see it's not going to take long to get this result. They all just kind of sit there. The difficult part is, and this is when I spoke about having not optimized everything appropriately, everything falls off the edge here. Now I'm going to show you a couple ways to cope with that. So the first thing we're going to do is, and this is just going to help for general art direction. So I'm going to drop in a camera and we're going to zero out the X, leave the Y, come across, we'll do a -90 there. So we're looking down at it. Now, come back at the camera. What I'm going to do, duplicate that, drag it over, spin it, scale it, make it a bit bigger. Do the same in the bottom. Maybe angle it in a weird way or something, I don't know. It's hard to kind of not get repeating patterns. I won't think about it too much for the sake of the tutorial though. And now what we're going to find, we've still got those XP colliders on there. So that's going to save us a bit of room. I'm going to be climbing up there a little bit now. Another thing we can do is, if you didn't even want to have them there and you just wanted to have one set of rocks, of course we can just drop in a massive plane there. I'm going to turn off my work plane, just drag that collider on there, and now they're just going to slide across that. Now what I spoke about when I said it was a little bit unoptimized is they still can tend to just drop down and they can still just run through it. And I think what's causing it is the fact that we're scattering it over the polygon area. Sometimes they can spawn so damn close to the edge of the polygons here that they just kind of clip through and do what they want. They seem to be behaving okay here. So it's not even an issue. I just spent a few hours like making one of these scenes and I could not get it to stop falling through. So I guess it's just kind of to do with, I was using completely different geometry, so I'm guessing that has a hand in it. One of these things you're just going to have to mess around with, unfortunately, but it is going to affect your result because you're going to be losing literally thousands of particles falling down underneath your scene, and your scene's going to be slow as hell because all these particles are there falling down and you don't even get to see them. So definitely try and remedy that if you can. I wish I could tell you there was an amazing way to do it. I think the best way would be to vertex map this and kind of clip the edges, but honestly I wasn't a fan of this XP vertex map. I did try, in fact, no, that's a lie, because I tried it with the XV vertex map and I put a giant sphere in the middle and it didn't help. So yeah, honestly I think it's just one of these things you're going to have to bargain with a little bit. Anyway, moving on. We have a nice little setup right now. Regarding geometry and colliders, it's not really going to get much more complicated than this. But when it comes to emission itself, I'm going to change this rate to about 20,000. For final render, I came up to about 40. You don't really need any more than that, especially because we're using grains. I'm going for quite a big look with the particles. I don't really want to create a look that, you know, there's like millions. So under rate, we're just going to turn off emit all frames, and we'll make this emit for about 40 frames, so about just over a second. And now if we give that a play, we're going to see it's going to be quite a little bit slower. But it's going to look a little bit nicer. It's going to really be getting in those grooves and whatnot. Now what we're going to do is we're going to come up to Dynamics, choose Dynamics, and XP Fluid FX. And now if we hit play, this has turned them into grains. So they're going to behave differently. They're going to behave slower. They're going to be a lot more annoying. Now at first glance, when you hit play here, you're going to see them kind of behaving in a little bit of disarray with each other. It's kind of create a big blob. I think a good way to look at this is the particles are thinking less about themselves and thinking about themselves as a kind of coherent hive of particles splodging out, you know, like a big clump of sand or snow, like a snowball. So one thing I want to say before I move on is Bob Walmsley, you know, the guy that makes all those awesome xparticles tutorials from Insidium. You know, I kind of am crawling on his back here in a lot of the parameters I'm going to use. He made an epic tutorial using snow and or creating snow. And you know, if you want to really understand these parameters, reference that tutorial. I am just kind of writing on the back of those advised parameters to create this. So I feel like I should say that as I'm progressing. Now, what we want to do is bring down this particle radius to 1. Again, like I said in my last tutorial, think of this as the space between the particles as a way to turn to when you know that you want to, you know, get a more detailed look. So immediately that's going to give us the grain look that we want. And it looks very nice. Looks very slick, very smooth. We're already on the way. Not going to lie, it looks kind of already like the final result. A couple things we want to tweak though. In extended data, we want to go to fluid data, and we want to go to granular. I'm going to bring up the viscosity to 50, stability to 20, cohesion to about 25. We hit play on that. Looks awesome. So I'll come back into this camera now and kind of see the look we're going for. Just a bunch of still stuck together particles in between all the rocks. Now in the fluid effects, this is the parameters I spoke about, I'm nicking from Bob's tutorial, is if you change this from fast to custom and you change the min steps to 3 and 4 and you change this to 2 and 3, so 3 and 4 and 2 and 3. Now we're going to get way more detail, but it's going to run like almost equally as fast. And it's just absolutely epic. And let that play out. Awesome. So, regarding the particle setup, not really going to be a whole lot else now. I'm going to hop over to creating some renders with this in Octane. But not a whole lot else to that setup. Really simple. We just want the emitter, we want the gravity, we want the fluid effects. So now we'll set this up in Octane, and then towards the end I'll show you a little couple things we can do to kind of introduce new colors and whatnot, and yeah, we'll move forward with that. So I'm just going to boot up Octane here, and we're going to turn that on, and in our output I'm going to change this to 1080 by 1080. In fact, keep it at 1080 unless you've got, like, I don't know, an insane PC. I'm just going to put it on 248 for compression so you can see the render better. Just going to hop in that camera there at the top. And we're going to change that focal length to 135. Going to get a kind of nice angle there. That plane's clipping through a bit too much though, isn't it? So I'm going to press F2, cameras, perspective, NA. And then just bring that down a little bit. Awesome, so we're going to put on a Octane object tag on there, grabbing a sphere, put that on a radius of 1, and drag in here, change that to geometry, and we're going to have all these in there. So, I'm going to drop in a texture environment, make it black, we'll drop in a light, area light, target the XP system. So in this F2 view, I'm just going to move that over, bring it up, closer, turn off that work plane, bring a light on the other side. Okay, so the first thing I found that made this render look awesome was like popping like really glossy colors on it. I did do a couple with just like a white material and it looked really cool, but if you pop like a nice lovely glossy yellow material in there, it's just going to look epic. So from here, you maybe want to let that play a little bit, let it flush out a little bit more, but not a whole lot else we really want to do to it. I'm just trying to think here in terms of some of these parameters. Yeah, there's nothing else I really want to do there besides create a second emitter later on, which we'll go into. I'm going to add an Octane object tag, and we'll add some highlight compression, enable post-processing, and then I'm going to duplicate that camera. And I feel like these kind of close-ups are where it really comes together. But one thing I'm finding about this lighting right now is it's really flat. There's some nice shadows going on, but it's really flat. And what I found is you can make this pop. You can really make this pop. So under the Octane light tag, I'm going to make it a power of 1000. Distribution Octane fall of map, set that to 90 degrees, and then I'm just going to select both these tags, set it to a sampling rate of 3000. You can see that's really beamed it up a bit, but I'm going to bring in this light, make it a little bit thinner and a little bit wider, do the same for this light, but in this second light, oh, I'm just going to copy that over. I forgot to do it. Select both lights when I did that. In this first light, I'm going to really bring down the power over there. Maybe create another camera. Let's try a few different angles. Okay. Now, I think what I'm finding, and it kind of takes to get to Octane to realize this, I think what I'm finding is the spheres are a bit big. I'm not really feeling like there's a juicy amount of them. So, to counter that, I'm going to bring this to about 0.8. So that makes them look a little bit nicer. And in the emission, I'm going to bring this up to 40,000. This was about the final amount that I used. So I'm going to let that play. I think just towards the end of the simulation here, do try and let them crawl off the rocks. They can be really stubborn, especially if you have a lot of cohesion. But try and let them drop off the rocks. I ended up not really caring. I'm not going to care here, but I think it looks a bit nicer. There was a couple of renders, I just photoshopped them out. Some of them I just left it because I was like, whatever. But, you know, if you can let them crawl off the rocks, I think it looks a little bit nicer. I'm going to hit render on that. We'll see how this looks with 40,000. Much nicer, much more filled in. They don't look like they're floating as much. I have found that any amount above this tends to not look as nice as well. Now, I'm struggling with the lighting a bit. I'm not super loving it. I think this is one of these things you just have to spend a lot of time going back and forth with for a scene like this. I found that the lower down angles tend to feel a little bit nicer on the light. I think we can do here to make the spheres themselves, crikey, that one big, look a lot nicer, is to mess with the texture of these rocks. So you heard me mention at the start of the tutorial that using darker colors tends to look better. I'm going to turn on the displacement, bring it up to about 4K, bring down the mid-level, and I'm going to bring down the saturation, I'm going to bring up the gamma. And then I'm going to bring up the gamma of the roughness and make it a bit more reflective. And what this does is it just makes all the particles completely stand out. And it's such a simple trick, and I found, I'm calling it a trick as if it's anything special, it's making material darker, but I really found myself struggling with the look of the particles. I wanted them to just look meaner and more aggressive in the image, and kind of came down to just make the rocks look a bit darker, and it really helped. And then you start getting these kind of angles here that just look amazing, especially if we really flatten it out. It looks awesome. So what we're going to do now is mess with a couple different colors and see how that looks. I'm going to show you kind of a really cool way to collide the colors together here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit pause on that render. I'm going to leave it there. I'm going to hop out the cameras. I'm going to create a group for them. Alt G, call it cameras. I'm going to turn it off. Now what I'm going to do is call this 1, drag it and drop it, and call it 2. And then on this second set of rocks here, simply just make that the emitter. And we're about to double the amount of particles we have in the scene, so it's going to get a lot slower, and they're going to interact with each other. So that's going to be a bit tricky as well. This is an optional thing you may or may not want to do. Then you're going to duplicate that sphere, call that 1, call that 2. This sphere, let's make it white. Drag it on there. And then we're going to drag that in there. And the particle rendering of the second emitter. Delete the first one. And then we're going to let that play. Did I whip around at a really weird angle? Yeah, so I actually want this one. Rocks 1. I want that one in there. The one above. From our above camera angle. That's the one I want. Okay, so once that's done, if we hit render here, you're going to see something pretty cool looking. I really do think this just looks awesome. As you can see, all the particles kind of like they've kind of like merged together. I'm going to create another camera here because you kind of have to compensate and come up a little bit on the Z there. But you can see they kind of end up merging together, and it just looks so cool. You can get these like angles of them where they've kind of overlapped. And there's so many different color combinations you can do with that, and I just think it gives such a nice look of like color interaction that you don't get from a lot of other methods of putting in multiple colors into a particle simulation. Just the way they kind of wave down under each other, and you get these sprites of different colors. And you can take this a step farther if you wanted to, and add in an emitter down here too, and then have them interacting upwards. But of course, I think it's good to be scarce with it and not go too mental, because at the end of the day, these bottom rocks here were really only just as a collider. And I think it could be valuable to put them in on the sides too, if you just want to really cover up what's going on the side. And then when you have these kind of like low angles, it's not tapering off at all. And if I hit render there, I'll just spend a few minutes simulating that. You can see we kind of have the freedom now to roam a bit around a bit more, and it's really cool because they'll come over and they'll splash against the rocks that you've got over the other end of the scene, as opposed to just kind of falling off over the plane. I am just going to check, did any start? Yeah, some started to go under. So you can see there they do. I think that was from me moving the plane. I think the position of the plane seems to have a bit to do with it. So I think maybe adding in a plane to the scene is maybe like really important. But you know, that I'm losing that amount of particles, I don't really care, to be honest. But yeah, just be careful that you're not losing like all of the ones you're simulating, because these can be quite heavy to work with. But I don't think there's much else to really go over here. It is a really simple setup. It's a fun setup. It can be a little bit nippy. As you can see now, looking at my render, I don't have any LUTs in the camera. I haven't messed with the exposure, and it's really popping. It's really screaming at you. And I think that's what's awesome about this look. It's simple, but you might have to spend a bit of time tweaking, and yeah, it's really quite a great look. I haven't found any really means or purpose to animate these yet. I might do that in the future and come back with that. So if that's something you want to see, please let me know and comment down below and tell me you want to see that, because I think doing this with flip and having them all kind of like splashing and moving in between the rocks and stuff would look awesome. But in terms of creating some awesome stills or some like popping in animations, this looks amazing. And yeah, thank you for watching. If you want to get these project files, I have found, you know, that even like I was recreating this scene about I was 3-4 times getting used to it and stuff before I recorded the tutorial, and I was going back into the initial scene that I made, and I was copying the parameters verbatim, and I wasn't getting the same results. So it really can be quite tricky following a tutorial like this with particles. They behave so differently depending on such micro adjustments. So, you know, stick with it, stay persistent. But if you do want to go get my original project files, you can do. They are on the store. I also want to say that I am now doing private coaching. I'm about to launch a bunch of kind of short form courses to go along with that. At the moment, if you want to inquire, just email me, but there will be a website going live soon. So if you're interested in that and taking your cinema skills to the next level, and me teaching you all about building a freelance business, making money, all that kind of stuff, that's all going to be detailed in the one-on-one coaching. I don't think there's much else to go over with this tutorial. I'm sorry it was a bit more of a messier one compared to some of my other tutorials. I tend to really structure these tutorials out and record them in strict segments and make sure that I'm going over everything clearly. But I kind of thought I've done that with these parameters in the last couple of tutorials, and it's nice to sit down, be a bit more relaxed, and dodge around the scene a little bit more without worrying, and just kind of sit and let you guys follow as you will. And I just think it's nice to dip between those two styles. Nonetheless, thank you for watching. I will be uploading more xparticle tutorials immediately. I'm on it. Don't worry. No, more is on the way. So tag me in these renders on Instagram. Show me them. And I'll see you in the next tutorial. Thank you.